Sugar Star Child, Black Egyptians, you cannot stop my fate. At Black Egyptians, I produce content based on Black history and culture, including ancient Egypt, polygyny, traditional African religion, and lifestyle. Since Egypt is the foundation of this channel, I have to do it justice by making a video on the legendary first king of Egypt, Narmer. We already know ancient Egypt was the cradle of civilization, that they led the world in architecture, arts, science, maths, that the Greeks and Romans studied under Egyptian priests and used this knowledge to build the modern world as we know it today. A lot of the inventions we have in society came from ancient Egypt. If you don't believe me, just go on the ancient Egyptian science and technology site and you'll see for yourself. The link is in the description. I'm making it easy for you. I'm saying all this because none of it would have been possible without Narmer. Narmer was the first pharaoh because he was the first person to unify the two separate kingdoms of ancient Egypt. Before Narmer, Egypt operated as separate states, Northern Egypt known as Lower Egypt and Southern Egypt known as Upper Egypt. This went on for 2 centuries until Narmer unified them in 3100 BC. This was the start of the Egyptian dynasty. What followed was a civilization which led and inspired the world to this day. Narmer inherited the throne of Upper Egypt from the previous ruler and then conquered Lower Egypt to become the first pharaoh. Most historians just talk about Upper and Lower Egypt, but according to Dr. York, there was also a middle kingdom in between Upper and Lower Egypt. He writes, at one time the Nile Valley was divided into 3 kingdoms. The first kingdom, the delta of Lower Egypt. The second kingdom, Middle Egypt near present-day Cairo. The third kingdom, Upper Egypt near the First Cataract, a rocky rapid in the Nile that separated Egypt from the south. In this year, let's say 3100 BC, the ruler of the third kingdom conquered the pharaoh of Middle Egypt. The person to succeed him was none other than Menes, who inherited that position as pharaoh of both Middle and Upper Egypt. Not content with that position, he went on to conquer the Delta and Lower Egypt successfully. For the first time in the history of Egypt, the Nile Valley was united under a single ruler. Ancient Egypt as a powerful Nubian empire begins. What a brilliant synopsis. That's why Dr. York is the master teacher of Nuwapu. In fact, a book called The Rise and Fall of Ancient Egypt by Toby Wilkinson also speaks about 3 kingdoms, Tejeni, Nubt, and Neken. Narmer's victory over Lower Egypt was the final battle in the war for unification. The name Narmer is broken down like this. Nar means catfish and Mer means a chisel. Put together would mean fierce catfish or raging catfish. I have to point out early on that Narmer was a black African man, a black Egyptian. In the words of Sheikh Anta Diop, he was unquestionably black because we know the lengths the Arab and white institutions, including educational, historical, medical, and media, has taken to lie and cover up the truth about our Nubian ancestors and African kingdoms. The kingdoms of Upper and Lower Egypt go back to 3400 BCE, known as the White Land and Red Land respectively. That's 300 years before the unification. And one source says they were fighting for nearly 200 years, which takes us to 3300 BC. The time before the unification of ancient Egypt, in 3100 BC, is known as the pre-dynastic period that stretches from 5000 to 3100 BC. It's said that a southern king, Scorpion, made the first attempts to conquer the northern kingdom around 3200 BC. So Narmer was the next ruler in line after Scorpion, inheriting Upper Egypt and the Middle if we go by Dr. York and Wilkinson. A century later, King Menes would subdue the north, Lower Egypt, and unify the country, becoming the first king of the first dynasty. Ancient Egypt is divided into 31 dynasties. Each dynasty is a series of rulers in a family line or group of common origin. A dynasty can also be referred to as a kingdom, while there's an intermediate period, periods of relative instability when there wasn't a leading pharaoh all over Egypt. Narmer started Dynasty 1, before that was Dynasty 0. This makes me think of the time of the first men spoken about in Game of Thrones. If we use the timeline set by Manetho, a Greek historian, Narmer would have unified Egypt in 31,500 BC, in 3150 BC, or 3118 BCE. King Narmer ruled from the city of Hierakonpolis, and then from the White Walls, which became known as Memphis and later Abydos. The early dynastic period, also known as the Archaic period, saw the development of the foundations of Egyptian society installed by Narmer, one of which included the all-important ideology of kingship. The doctrine of divine kingship defined pharaonic civilization. The king was the god's representative on earth. He was an embodiment of divinity, a god incarnate. In the field of Egyptology, there are questions about the identity of Narmer. People associate him with Menes, or the second pharaoh of Egypt, Hor-Aha. The Egyptologist William Francis Petrie says that Menes was actually an honorific title, meaning he who endures, not a personal name. For example, if you watch Naruto, Jiraiya, Tsunade, and Orochimaru were known as the legendary Sannin after an epic performance in the Second Ninja War, and that would apply to them as a group. Menes is more likely to be the Greek version of his name than a different person, and in keeping in line with the Egyptian theme of a dynasty, Hor-Aha is more likely to be his son. I say this because Menes and Hor-Aha's names are found in Nephihotep's tomb, his supposed wife. Hor-Aha is actually my Egyptian name, in full, Hor-Ahat Tepipet, fighting Hawk Chief of the Sky. This marks the end of part 1 of the video. Be sure to subscribe to my Patreon to finish watching part 2 in full. See you on the other side.